And then speaking of things going the other way, Indiana football. I don't know. I don't know. Spend a whole lot of time on it because they have a game this week that is basically it's not winnable for Indiana. And I hate to say that about any time of a competition that's upcoming, but I think that there is nothing in me that can even say that there is a remote chance of anything close to that happening. So that's going to put Indiana at 2-6, meaning they would have to go on a 4-game Big Ten winning streak to become bowl eligible. That is not going to happen. So again, you're not going to be bowl eligible. My problem is with all of these contracts, some of them that are very poorly written, always in the favor of the coach, which that's fine to give them clauses to reach certain levels, but why are there not also clauses that will dock you if you do not perform on the field or whatever the case may be? There's no other work environment on planet Earth that allows that to happen unless you're the CEO of a company, which most of us are not in either of those positions. We have to perform or we're out of a job. If we are not fortunate to have the great listeners and audience that we do, I tell them every day, there's no point in me being here. I'm boom, out of a job. If nobody cared about all the great content you produce, WDRB.com wouldn't have you, but they do, and they do for a reason. They don't need to put a caveat like that in your contract or mine or anything like that. But why do coaches get such special treatment?
It's a great question, and I don't know when it started, but it's been going on now for too long, and I'm sure they all argue that their punishment for not performing is the extra year isn't added on to the contract the way it is when they do perform, and they always need that 4-year cushion so they're not at a competitive disadvantage while recruiting. That somebody can say, well, he's only got a few years left on his contract. He might not be there when you're there, but for Indiana football, there's two questions. There's the micro and there's the macro. And the micro is this season. And, when you can't beat Rutgers at home and you're not even competitive, really, you can't beat Maryland. Now you've lost to both of those teams 3 years in a row. You're not going to win 4 in a row to end the season. We know that this season is over. They might win one more game, right? At the most.
Which
it's what they need to be focusing on is the macro. What about next year? What about fielding a competitive team next year? What about getting fans excited to come to games again next year?
What about keeping players on the roster?
Keeping players on the roster. What about turning the ship around from back to back to back seasons of finishing last in the Big Ten East and, not accepting that anymore? And, we all know that without the buyout, it'd be a no-brainer. There would be a change, but they're going to have a serious level conversations of like, what is the cost of keeping the current coaching staff and what is the cost of changing the coaching staff and figuring out what's the wisest course of action. And, I think we've said for a while that there's no way they're going to pay the $20 million, but when you think about, and I know that Greg Doyle wrote about this last week, when you think about the cost of keeping him, I mean, how are you going to get people excited to sell tickets for next season? How are you going to get people excited about coming to games next season? I mean, that's going to be a huge, huge challenge. How are you going to get guys to come in out of the portal? It's going to be a big challenge. So I don't know what the answer is. But it's when you look around the country, you watch. Virginia's been awful. Virginia rises up and beats North Carolina. Duke used to be a laughing. They're coming to Louisville as a top 20 team, which has only lost to Notre Dame and Florida State. I can come up with more. Washington State has traditionally not been a great program. They're winning. Oregon State's winning. I mean, you got to find a way to figure it out, man. And It's got to be a commitment by Indiana University to take football more seriously. That's where it all begins. By the president, by the board of trustees. I think the fans, I've sensed it more from the fans and the media of, being less accepting of, what's happening. But that the will to get better has to come from the administration.
Absolutely. And then you have to ask, okay, let's say they do that. That's a ton of money.
It is
to worry about, but you have a ton of money that's going to be coming in, and how you can't continue to go in this league and not care about football, because this league is getting more and more difficult, and
right.
You're going to get pushed further and further down. And when Dylan was on earlier, he said that, 10 years when there's a super league, he goes, Indiana is not going to get an invite. I don't care how good their basketball program is, because it's going to turn out to be like the Big East, when they used to have a bunch of great basketball programs, but they didn't have football.
Right. No, there's no doubt about that. They'll be in a secondary league or third level league, even at this point. I mean, there's no way they would get an invite. So I don't know. They just have it. This is the price they're paying for not taking football seriously in the 90s and the 2000s, and when they didn't really take it seriously till Fred Glass, more seriously until Fred Glass decided to do some of the projects at the stadium and hire Kevin Wilson. And I know that Kevin Wilson's tenure ended poorly, but he at least was a step in the right direction. And Terry Hefner, I think, was a step in the right direction too. But I don't know. It's when you look around and see what other schools who should have fewer resources than Indiana are able to do in football, it's just mind-boggling that they've got themselves at the point that they're at right now. And I don't know, the whole quarterback thing this year, it just comes across as I don't know the right word, just inept. I mean, the whole way they've handled the quarterback situation, like you're trying to get a competitive advantage or puzzle the other team by who you're going to play. No, you're not. You just come across as indecisive, and you don't know what you're doing. You can't settle on a plan.
Absolutely. But to me, that goes to the core. And actually, when you have Rod Carey come in, now you change OCs, and then he has to go through the process to determine his quarterback. And I wrote this in our prediction for the last game. I predicted again. I said at the beginning of the season that Brendan Sorsby was going to be the starter, but I was proven to be, quote, wrong. I said, I don't think that I was then, and I still don't think that I am. I think that you're going to see Brendan Sorsby be the starter after Rod Carey has made the decision. And that is another indictment on the inability to recognize talent, to acknowledge the right way to go, and to develop that. Because let's say Brendan Sorsby had taken every snap from game one, Indiana would probably be in a little bit better shape. And people could say, well, you could say for the same for Jackson. I don't know that I agree with that, because I thought Sorsby was going to be the guy. And that's because of conversations I had, not because I just guessed at that. And so now, and that's exactly what happened. Now, he had a rough day against Michigan, but guess what? It was freaking Michigan. They're allowing 6 points a game. So let's see how he goes the rest of the year. But that's just an indictment on the decision-making and how and why decisions are made under the staff. And that's what is putting them at peril, I think.
Well, beyond that, Jim, let's be honest. Quarterback is a leadership position. You have to put somebody in that position that the rest of the team will look to as a leader. And when you're not able to commit to one guy and show that you consider them the leader, it makes it harder for the rest of the team to consider him a leader. So I'm sure you got some guys that are saying, I think Jackson needs to be the guy. And other guys are saying, yeah, I think Sorsby needs the guy. And that doesn't help in terms of building the kind of cohesiveness and team building exercises you need to have within a football team. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it's not the way that good teams handle the quarterback position. It's just not. The whole thing about I know who the quarterback is, and I'm not going to tell you after like you've played that card like 7 times. It's laughable. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is, right? I mean, until the rest of the team gets better. Tom Brady could have played quarterback for Indiana last week, and they weren't going to beat Rutgers.
Exactly. And I don't know why. Again, I think that just goes to indecisiveness of not knowing. And that's another reason why I'm not in favor of a defensive minded head coach. I want a guy who's offensive minded, which I know defense is of uber importance, but get yourself a great defensive coordinator, as good as you can be. Like, look what Indiana would have been if Kevin Wilson hadn't have been, the bad things of Kevin Wilson, him and Tom Allen. That would have been, Indiana would have been something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can do it either way. You can look at Rutgers has done it by going defense. Schiano's a defensive guy. The message that was sent Saturday is the worst possible message. If you let Rutgers, a team that you should be better than, come into your stadium and become bowl eligible in the middle of October on your field, that's just a terrible visual. On the flip side, then Maryland's done it with offense. You can do it either way, but what you have to do is pick the course that you're going to be on and stick with it. You can't keep vacillating about, no, we're going to be a running attack. No, we're going to be an option attack. No, we're going to pass the ball. I mean, you have to have a plan. And I'm sure they'll say they do have a plan, but if you're sitting and watching it all unfold, it's hard to tell what the plan is.